Hey, what's going on? This is Malcolm, and I'm back with another Destiny 2 video on M3 Gaming. I usually do this before I get my day started just to deal with some anxiety, stress, whatever. Shooting things in the face helps. I was listening to the news a little bit earlier, and a lot of what has been consuming my time and interest has been Trump's legal issues, and I really need to pull away from that because I know from the Russia investigation I was way too involved and way too disturbed by the outcome. Really, how it was pushed aside, and so I think about that with all of the evidence that's being floated. But it's interesting. I mean, it's a novel legal battle. Some of these questions have never been asked before because no one's ever broken such laws. So I think one that interested me a lot had to do with Severance. And that's not the TV show on Apple. That's the idea that Mark Meadows wants his trial moved to federal court. And I don't know. I guess maybe I listened to some right of center podcasts that are basically not adhering to some of the, I guess, liberal orthodoxy about it. And so it's funny that is my impression, so different than, say, the typical liberal position. But honestly, it's kind of a nothing burger other than the fact that a federal trial would not be televised. I mean, I really do want to be able to see it. But one of the more simple arguments that I think any judge, except for those in Fulton County, would find interesting is the fact that basically that these
victory.
Just basically the idea that that some of the defendants were federal employees at the time. I know some people find that hard to see, but Trump himself was still president when a lot of these crimes were taking place until Joe Biden was inaugurated. President-elect is not a federal president. That's what they say, the continuity of power. So yeah, Mark Meadows was still the chief of staff to the president. When he called to make, to commit these crimes, he helped facilitate them. I don't know if his charges are related to that. I don't think there's any that he committed any crime by connecting the Raffensperger call.
You fought.
But the fact that he was still, there's evidence that he was still acting as the president's chief of staff. I mean, the fact that he was still getting paid as chief of staff, I don't think it's even contested that most of the behavior was happening while they were still working at the White House. All I know is kind of what Greg has taught me from his watching MSNBC. But people are kind of using the Hatch Act as a way of obfuscating almost the possibility that they're right. And to me, it doesn't really matter if they violated the Hatch Act or not. It's like you're guilty of I don't know why I'm running Stasis. There are no Stasis mods.
I just wanted to help one of my favorite guardians out. Guy can't do that? I thought this was a new golden age.
Okay.
Be kind to each other. Am I right? I'm sorry.
Take the arc orbs off. And that. But then what's left? Like, right? So, okay, I'll say solar, since it's solar damage. Overload. That one. Yeah, that's actually okay because I do have a Stasis fusion and machine gun. But yeah, listening to the news, especially where I want the world to be different than what it is when I am getting way too emotionally involved in things that barely affect me directly, right? Like I know that global internet, global economies matter. National politics ultimately does affect me, but truthfully, at the granular level at which I follow it, I know it's not really helping because it doesn't have that direct impact, and most importantly, I don't have that much control over it, other than my vote, other than some activism that I can engage in, which I feel like I need to do more of. Probably good for one. I remember when I did more volunteering. Yeah, this is pretty good. Vesper radius on Stasis and lightning crystals. Just mainly because the grenade recharge rate on glacial grenades is so high. Then you have chill clip fusion rifle, giving you back class ability energy. And Reaper as a mod.
Looking for the deep stone crypt here. Then they're groping around in the dark. So
yeah, I like this
Sounds like there's plenty
build
else
here.
they can find around here. Keep pushing, Guardian.
So yeah, I mean, it doesn't give you the blind effect when you're on arc. Or say when you're on Stasis, the Vesper radius doesn't give blinding. And you have Protocols, which is better. Interacts with your subclass pretty well. I'm not usually freezing too many things, though. But it gives it, I wasn't blinding that many things either, so it's about the same area of effect. If I have to go blinding or freezing, I think freezing is better. Having the turrets would be nice, the slowing turrets. I don't think it's that important, though. Just have to have the gameplay loop here. Wow. Oh yeah, it's art. Even though I have art resist on, this must be way much That was pretty shitty. Yeah.
Sometimes I forget how pleasant it is. The quiet after battle.
Pleasant, yes. Brief. Especially on a moon like Europa.
All the more reason to enjoy it while
Support
it
for this
lasts.
show comes from Intel. Where do world-changing ideas get their start? At Intel, it starts with real solutions, and real solutions start with exceptional engineering. The quantum computing revolution, the next generation of AI experts, the renewable energy grid, early diagnosis for cancer. The examples are countless, the impacts are endless, but the foundation is always the same. It starts with Intel. Learn more at intel.com/stories.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. The lights are out and it's time to sleep. Close your eyes, but then your mind starts going a mile a minute.
We just moved. I would describe this move as a real crash landing, but we made it. Max made it to her first day of kindergarten, which is a real victory for us. Anyhow, I wanted to give you my 2 quick predictions for the Apple event. One is a vibes-based. I think the vibe of this iPhone event will be the most different of any we've had in a long time because Apple has to keep the focus on the Vision Pro somehow. iPhone sales are slowing down, and the only real big change is USB-C, which obviously Apple does not want to talk about too much. So I think the vibes of this event are just going to be different. And I'm excited to go there. I'm excited to see what it's like. I'm always excited to go see new tech, but I think the vibes of this event are going to be different. So that's prediction 1. Prediction 2 is that they're going to completely gloss over USB-C on the iPhone 15 and spend a long time talking about USB-C on the iPhone 15 Pro because that will reportedly be a Thunderbolt port, which is kind of a big deal for all the camera stuff. So that's my big prediction. Gloss over USB-C on the 15, spend time on it on the 15 Pro because I think pro photographers are going to be super stoked about using this camera over Thunderbolt. Not the world's biggest prediction, but you know me, I'm excited about it. All right, I'm sorry I'm not here. I got to go back to unpacking, but I will be at the iPhone event with everybody next week, and I'll be on the show next week. I promise. Come hell or high water. Rock and roll.
Welcome to the Vergecast, the flagship podcast. It's the action button. I'm your friend David Pierce. We have a whole crew here. We have a lot to talk about. Alex Kranz is here. Hi, Alex.
Hi, I'm your friend wondering how often you think about the Roman Empire.
Not enough now that I think about it.
Yeah.
You know, every once in a while, like what would Caesar do? I had a bracelet that says that, but you know, not enough. Richard Lawler's here. Hi, Richard.
Hi. I saw a viral tweet about the Roman Empire not existing, and I'm choosing to believe that conspiracy theory.
Oh, I like that one.
Have you guys seen the one where it's the picture of the pyramids and it says like, this is why they couldn't move the pyramids to a museum, and underneath it, it's just underground. The pyramids are like several hundred feet deep also.
They're like the Titanic iceberg.
It's the best thing on the internet. Dan Seifert's here. Hi, Dan.
Hello. I have no interesting clips about the Roman Empire.
Dan, what's your favorite conspiracy theory?
Yeah, let's not even go there.
There's no upside to you answering that question, Dan. I'm going to save you from me, and we're going to move on here. We have a lot to talk about this week. Eli is still moving and still not here, and please shame him publicly for continuing not to be here. We have a lot to talk about. There's an Apple event coming up next week. We're going to spend a bunch of time talking about that. There's a bunch of gadgets this week. We are like firmly in gadget season. We have new stuff from Sonos, new stuff from GoPro, new stuff from Sony, all kinds of stuff. There's some crazy streaming news. The Bobs are fighting to Disney, and we also have a lot of feelings about this.
I'm so excited.
It's possible that segment of the show is going to be 9.5 hours long, so apology. And then we have lightning round full of fun stuff at the end. But let's start with Apple. So we're recording this on Thursday the 7th. The event is on Tuesday the 12th. It's going to be the iPhone 15. Dan, you're going. Rate me your level of enthusiasm for the iPhone event this year.
So I hear there's going to be a new iPhone, probably a new Apple Watch. You know, I'm excited to see if they can surprise us. Because at this point, with any of these things, whether Apple or Google or Samsung or whoever it is, the leaks have kind of tell all the story. That everything basically comes out, and we don't really have a ton of surprises going into these events. And then also, this is the 15th iPhone by generation. Like, it's not even the 15th iPhone. It's like the 7th. Actually, but like, it's like the number 15 in this line. And so, like, really, what are they going to do? That's interesting. And like, there's a lot of rumors. Like, sure, we'll talk through like the action button and titanium and stuff like that.
Yeah,
like,
make sure this area out
the iPhone
fast.
and the Apple Watch, for that matter, are like known products. So
You're not hyped for Apple finally, truly embracing USB-C?
I think it's good.
Yeah.
I can't remember the last time I plugged a cable into my phone, but it's good.
You went all in on MagSafe.
I went all in on wireless charging like 10 years ago.
Even for your AirPods?
Every service in Dan's house is a cheap hat.
Yeah, there's just like, I'm just surrounded by cheap hats. Like, I'm looking at my desk and there's like 4 right in front of me. But I mean, like, I think for a lot of our audience, it'll be a nice convenience thing when they need to like share a cable and stuff like that. But ultimately, like, there have been other ways to charge your phone, and nobody is syncing their phone with their computer anymore, which is like the other reason you plug the phone into a cable.
I always forget about that, and then I'll plug my phone in, and it'll be like, "You ready to sync?" And I'm like, "Who are you? How did you get here? Get out! I don't want you."
So I wrote a piece this week about Lightning, and it was basically the assignment from Jake, our tech editor, was like, write about the death of the Lightning port. Like, was it good? Was it bad? How was it? And the like overwhelming feeling that I got going back and watching the old announcements.
The brood is relentless, but do not lose sight of your target. The Cabal's champion is near. They cannot deny it. Challenge them. End this.
Have a stand, Guardian.
Every cafe you go to is going to have a Qi charger in every single table. Do you guys remember this when they were like,
"Where's my cafe table?"
Every surface in the world is going to be a Qi charger, and you're going to be able to just put your phone down and charge it as if by magic. And I bet my ongoing theory about this Apple event is they're going to spend like 6 seconds on USB-C. They're going to be like, look, a port, USB-C, Europe, and then like 3 hours telling you how great MagSafe is.
I don't think they're going to talk about Europe at all.
No, they're not going to say Europe.
They're not going to say Europe at all. They're not going to make it seem like they were forced into this. They're going to say how you now can use the same charger for your iPad and your iPhone with the same cable, and we made it such a convenience.
And your AirPods.
And your AirPods, right. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be a lot of discussion because there isn't a lot to say about it. It's a different port to charge your phone.
Well, I've been talking to a bunch of people who are like, so the thing that happened when the iPad went from Lightning to USB-C was that all of a sudden there were, new accessories that could be supported. You could plug new things into it. You could get a bunch of ports in a dock, like all new computery things were suddenly possible. Some of those turned out to be very cool. Most of them never really came to fruition. And so I've talked to a bunch of people who are like, oh, I'm going to be able to like plug my external storage into my iPhone now. And I keep being like, you're not. You just super aren't. Like, I would be so shocked if Apple did that.
Apple Dex is happening.
I was about to say Apple Dex. Apple Dex. Like,
I mean, that is never going to happen. We can spend a whole podcast on why that'll never happen. But it's worth like dissecting what the rumors are saying about the USB port. And so what they're saying is USB-C port across the iPhones announced, which would be the iPhone 15, the iPhone 15 Plus, the iPhone 15 Pro, and the iPhone 15 Pro Max, unless they change the name to Ultra or something like that. So they all share the same port, but they won't all share the same capabilities. The lesser models will still be USB 2.0, which means that you're not attaching a bunch of accessories to it because it doesn't have the bandwidth. And then the Pro models will have maybe Thunderbolt capabilities or USB 4 capability so that it is a faster data transfer speed. What is missing from that is, will it support like proper video out? You can do that with an iPad, but will it do that on the iPhone? And it probably will in the way that like you can plug it in and watch a video on a bigger screen, but a desktop software environment is never going to happen.
I feel like they're kind of going to be obligated to do it, not just because everybody, if you've got this port, you should be able to do all this stuff that you can do with other devices that use the exact same processor, but also because of accessibility reasons. Like if I have a phone, I should be able to use it however I want, however I need to be able to.
Sure. And to be fair, the Lightning iPhone supports that already. Like you can plug an iPhone into a TV to play. You can use the lightning to HDMI adapter, stuff like that.
How many people have that adapter and have done that? Like, I've got a USB-C to HDMI cable.
How often do you use it?
Not since I got rid of the Sony imaging webcam.
Yeah, so what are we talking about?
It's a pretty niche use case, for sure.
Alex, the thing you just described is like a true and lovely idea about a company that believes that people should be able to choose how their devices work and has just nothing to do with Apple as it exists in the real world.
No. I think Apple has a moral obligation to make it accessible. If they have the port that accessible,
Apple would say use AirPlay.
I think Apple doesn't give one solitary shit about your moral obligations. I think Apple is going to lock this port down in every single imaginable way. And they're going to tell the same security story that they tell about the App Store and everything else. They're going to say, if we just let you plug in anything, all kinds of things could go wrong. All your important data is on your iPhone. We can't just let you plug in a random thing. Bad things could happen. And that's just true enough that Apple's going to get away with it. And honestly, I don't care because I think the number of people who are out there wanting desperately to like plug a USB keyboard and 3 terabyte hard drive into their iPhone to do things is like basically non-existent.
I think there's like MKBHD and 6 other YouTubers who are like, oh my God, I can finally get these high-res files off my iPhone in extra fast time. So there's someone's going to be happy tomorrow with their Pro.
That customer is buying an iPhone Pro, Ultra, whatever. They're not buying the base model iPhone for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, it's fine. Okay, so let's just run through some of the big rumors here. So obviously USB-C is the big one. And I would say like on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely do we think that is? That's at least at like a 9, right? Like I'd be shocked if that doesn't happen at this point.
Yeah, that's a pretty safe bet, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, if they don't do it, that'll be the whole story.
Yeah, that's really true. That's really true. They're like, here's just an action button. And like someone will raise their hand and be like, what about the USB-C port?
Have you heard about Lightning?
The second one is the action button, which has been the rumored thing. Again, I think potentially just on the Pro and Pro Max models, but kind of like the Apple Watch Ultra, there will be a customizable button you can use to do things. Personally, I'm very excited about this as someone who does the same set of things over and over constantly all day on my phone.
Can I pour cold water all over your excitement?
Please.
oh no.
The action button on the Ultra, the Watch Ultra, does nothing.
Oh, yeah.
It is like the most disappointing thing ever. And it would not surprise me if this action button on the iPhone is similarly annoyingly limited.
It like only opens Control Center.
And it replaces a switch, right? Like the switch that was already there.
Yeah, it's getting rid of the mute button.
They're taking away a button and adding a slightly different button.
Yes.
Adding something that could, for a lot of people or the right person, be a better experience. Because like personally, I can't remember the last time, just like I can't remember the last time I plugged in my phone to a cable to charge. I can't remember the last time I flicked the mute switch on the side of my phone. It's always on mute.
Yeah, we talked about this last week. It's because you're not 100 years old, like everyone who lets their phone ring loudly. Dan, congratulations, you did it.
But they're not switching it either. That's why it's always ringing.
No.
Because they're not switching it.
So here's the deal. Last week I ranted about this button because I still think it's stupid because all I'm going to do is turn it into a mute button because that's what I need it for. And somebody wrote back and was like, you were stupid, Crayons. And I always stop to pay attention when someone says that. See if they're right? They might be. And this person was like, it feels like every week I have to go.
That's been the Vex plan for centuries. If either side were competent, they'd have wiped each other out already. So the task falls to us.
I have to go and tell my dad that he just has the mute button on, and that's why he's not getting calls. And I was like, I forget that.
Oh my God, I get that all the time.
Hello, and welcome to Positively Dreadful, the last episode of Positively Dreadful, with me, your host, Brian Boyler. So first things first, this is less of a goodbye than a see you later. What I mean is, if you like the show and or me, don't unsubscribe from this feed. It'll almost certainly be revived at some point, and I wouldn't want to have to come and chase you all down to sign up again. Second, we're going to go out by answering some of your questions about the show, the issues we've covered, politics, and a bunch of other stuff. So here to prompt me with your questions and help me answer them is my producer and co-pilot, Emma Illick-Frank. Hi, Emma. How are you?
Hey, Brian. How's it going?
You ready to do this?
I was born ready.
Great. So why don't you just hit me up with some questions?
All right. So Jenny wants to know, there are persuadable conservatives and independents who don't really understand what happened in the 2020 election. How can we better message to them?
That's a hard one, I think, in large part because Fox News and the whole right-wing propaganda apparatus just makes it hard. Even just over the course of my career, people are much more siloed in their information ecosystems than they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But I think the only way around that, or the best we and Democrats and journalists can do, is just think of things like the January 6th committee as more central to politics than I think at least the Democratic Party tends to. It should be something that they're excited to do, think is urgent, understand will redound to their benefit politically, rather than like some unpleasant business that they're kind of obligated to attend to. What would that look like in practice is a little hard to say. My instinct is to think back to how Republicans reoriented their politics after September 11th, the terrorist attack in 2001. And obviously, like January 6th was not 9/11. They were just very different kinds of events. But it was traumatic. And for a time, at least, there was similar consensus after January 6th that the perpetrator should be punished, that it was unacceptable, that it shouldn't happen again. And I honestly think Democrats are a little derelict for not waving the bloody shirt about it a bit more than they have. Not that they've been quiet about it exactly, but it often ends up taking a backseat like they did the January 6th committee. That doesn't necessarily close the book on things, right? There is the constitutional question of whether Donald Trump is eligible to be a federal office holder, having aided and abetted an insurrection or giving aid and comfort to insurrectionists. And that's something that Democrats in Congress could try to put their stamp on. They can force votes on things like that. They could use what happened on January 6th to sort of better target Latin voters, the ones that they've lost to the GOP in recent years, because many of those voters come from or are descended from places where coups happen more frequently and wreck their countries and end their free societies. But it has to be concerted. It has to be part of a plan, something better planned than, a special committee they tried to avoid setting up to do one investigation and then kind of shut down conversation about it to the greatest extent possible.
One question that I was going to touch on later, but what I think kind of fits into this discussion well now, is why is the Republican Party getting away with so much shit? Are people morally worse than we think? And it sounds like what you're saying is, no, this is really a failure of messaging. Though I feel like I come down more on the cynical view of like, no, people actually don't. They don't care. Or maybe they don't know to care.
Yeah, well, so that's the thing. Is it that they don't care or that they don't know to care? And I think that there's many people who don't realize that, like, this is what happened is sort of an existential threat to the things that they learn at such a young age that they kind of take for granted. And so they continue to take them for granted about America, land of freedom, promise, democracy, etc. I am troubled by how many Americans seem to clearly grasp what happened on January 6th and are okay with it anyway. That's a big problem. And that's not a problem that I think Democrats can solve on their own. Like, beating Republicans and using January 6th and similar anti-democracy things to beat Republicans might train those people and their dubious morals that, like, what they're doing is hurting their pursuit of power. And so maybe they'll just stop for self-interested reasons. But largely, I think that the country isn't full of, people who are vicious or power mad or anti-democracy in any way. And that the means of reaching people who don't have a solid, intuitive, lasting understanding of why refusing to accept that you lost an election is intolerable in a democracy can be taught that or reminded of it through accountability processes that many Democrats are pretty shy about using. There was a very strange reluctance in the immediate aftermath of the election to begin impeachment proceedings. Obviously, like, the leadership's hand got forced, and it's good that it did. But that initial instinct to say, okay, January 6th is over, order is restored, he's got 14 days left in office, let's just white knuckle it through that. That instinct, I think, is directly tied to why it seems like so many people just don't care. But they take their cues from leadership, right? Like, they take their cues from elites and how elites respond to big traumatic events. And if the elites were more alarmed about this stuff and organized their politics more coherently around it instead of trying to get past it, then I think that Republicans would pay a price for what they did, or a greater price than they have paid. And there'd be a greater public consensus that things in that party just had to change, so that Trump or whoever comes after him wouldn't ever think to try that again. So yeah, I like, my criticism of the Democratic Party on the score comes from, I think, a reasonable faith in the public that, like, even the people who aren't super attuned to public affairs the way the listeners of this show are, they're decent and they get it. And this is really not a very hard thing to keep them focused on and animated about. But it needed to begin right away, and it needed to be sustained. And trying to re-galvanize them or recapture their attention about this matter just gets harder the longer we get away from it, because there's been this palpable desire to move on. And so politics has started to become about other things, right? And those things are like Hunter Biden. If Democrats had the tenacity about January 6th and the coup the Republicans are showing about Hunter Biden, I think we'd be in a better place.
Working at Crooked for a really long time, I feel like we talk a lot about messaging, and we talk a lot about what the Democrats are doing and how they need to be more pugilistic towards Republicans and all this stuff. And I'm kind of two minds, because I feel like, why are we trying to convince people to vote for Democrats without actually talking about what Democrats are doing on the ground, what Democrats are doing for you? And maybe the conversation should be less about beating Republicans than it should be about Republicans are going to fuck you when they get into positions of leadership. They don't care about you. But then on the other hand, as you're saying, it's is politics even about that anymore? No, people don't connect their lived reality to the ideals of their elected politicians, and there's a tremendous disconnect there. Is that possible to restore? Is that even worth restoring? Because it seems like a kind of short-term view, being just beat the bad party and then people will come around and see this for what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think policy is really interesting. It's challenging, implementation is hard, design is like a puzzle, and I would really love politics to be about competing policy visions. And I think the sad fact is that our political system is not set up to allow winning parties to make policy easier, so that there's an easy way to say to voters, you voted for me and now you have this. And you didn't before, and if you elect those guys, it might go away, and they're we'll be able to do less for you. So the political system itself makes a sort of more high-minded, more substantive politics hard. And then the way our media system is set up is that it's almost entirely for profit. And there just isn't a lot of money in talking about insulin prices. Very big deal. Joe Biden cut insulin prices, cut hearing aid prices. Civilization gets through climate change. It will be in no small part because of things Joe Biden did. Like, these are big deal things, and they matter to me a lot. And it's like a big part of why I want Democrats to beat Republicans in elections. But you have to, at some point, accept the world as it is, right? And the world as it is makes it really hard for Democrats to capture the public's attention with appeals to those kinds of substantive things. And it's not all their fault. It's not like they're not trying. Like, that's where they try. They're really pretty good about touting their policy achievements, the infrastructure bill, what they did with getting the economy back to full employment after COVID. They're not shy about it. It's just, it doesn't penetrate very deeply because it's not salacious, and the media is drawn to salaciousness. Like, what do you do about that? One is as you were saying, why is it important to beat Republicans? Well, part of it is the policy stuff. They'll make your drug prices higher. The other part of it is that there's a deep rot of corruption in that party. And that means that there's a lot of scandal. There's a lot of juicy, gross things that.
Yeah. I wish the Democrats fought.
It's Friday, September 8th. I'm Priyanka Arabindi.
And I'm Trevo Anderson, and this is What a Day, the pod that doesn't care too much about this week's comeback for Victoria's Secret fashion show.
Yeah, we, just like everybody else, have moved on to the Savage Fenty show.
Yes.
So sorry,
yes.
Miss Victoria.
Yes, that's the people's fashion show, okay?
Sorry.
On today's show, Florida's Supreme Court hears a case that puts abortion access on the line in the state. Meanwhile, Mexico's Supreme Court decriminalized the procedure.
But first, an update on Maui in the aftermath of the devastating wildfires that destroyed Lahaina last month. In a new report, Hawaii's Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism estimates that because of the fire's damages, the state's economy will lose about $1.9 billion through 2024. Over 800 businesses that employed 7,000 people were lost in Lahaina. And in the 3 weeks after the fire, over 8,000 new unemployment claims were filed in the state. And according to the department's director, the fires not only impacted West Maui where it burned, that impact has spread to the entire state.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know there's been a bit of an about face on tourism in the area because of this economic impact. What do we know about that?
Yeah, so at the beginning, state tourism officials were urging tourists to stay away from Maui. The island needed to rebuild. Obviously, that is a long-term process. But the major point was that there were so many residents in Maui who were in need of immediate shelter, food, and all these other resources that tourists shouldn't be getting in the way of. Like, tourists shouldn't be prioritized. It should be the actual people who live there. But pretty soon afterwards, state tourism officials changed their tune. They say that while tourists should avoid the areas that were damaged, they started to encourage them to come back to other parts of Maui and the other Hawaiian islands, saying that their spending is desperately needed for the local economy and keeping people employed and able to maintain their livelihoods.
Yeah, now that's a pretty complicated ask, right? Because you've got this, which is what the tourism officials are saying, but then there's also the demand for sensitivity and respect from the locals. Can you tell us a bit more about that tension?
Yes, definitely. We cannot get into the conversation about tourism in Hawaii without acknowledging some of these long-standing sentiments held by some Native Hawaiians and residents about the tourism industry. On one hand, obviously it provides revenue, but there's definitely a darker side to it as well. It's resulted in increased housing prices that price out Native Hawaiians from their homeland, climate change, which destroys the island's environment, and many feel like there's a lack of respect for the native land that tourists are occupying when they come for vacation, as well as a lack of awareness for how tourism has historically disenfranchised Native Hawaiians ever since 1778, when Captain Cook became the first European voyager to visit the island. We know that Western contact is what led to the illegal overthrow of the Hawaiian kingdom in 1893 by the US, and the near extinction of the Hawaiian language and culture that followed. It's been responsible for so many bad things in this area, as well as being a source of revenue. So a lot of mixed feelings from a lot of people.
Yeah, and we covered a bit of that history on our episode, Hawaii, an American Coup. Check that out, everyone.
Definitely.
So back to the situation here. What exactly do locals have to say about the place of tourists during the recovery process?
Yeah, I mean, they want to make sure people are listening to the state's plea to avoid coming to West Maui, but some also do see the money that tourism brings in as necessary. Take a listen to Courtney Walter, a local chef, speaking to Reuters.
That's how I felt. We're like, we can't have tourists here right now. We need to feed and take care of our own people. But those places are still running, and all those people still have their bills to pay, and they're single parents, and they have mortgages, and they own businesses. I think people are realizing now that everyone else in Maui still needs to make money.
According to Elihia Johnson, a public affairs officer for the Hawaii Tourism Authority, tourists should come to other parts of the island and support locally owned shops, restaurants, and farmers, and do activities run by small local businesses. All of that directly supports Maui residents and keeps them employed. Obviously, for tourists, this is a vacation, but I also think that being mindful and respectful of the devastation that these people and this land has experienced even before the wildfires is another key component. So if you do find yourself in this position, that is something that you are contemplating, please keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think it's really important just to be very cognizant and intentional if you are going to take your vacation to Hawaii, for sure. Thanks for that, Priyanka. Now on to some foolishness out of Florida, where today the state Supreme Court will hear a case that could overturn 34 years of legal precedent regarding the right to abortion access. If successful, as it is suspected to be, the state, which now provides the most abortion access in the Southeast, will become a very different place for those in need of the medical procedure.
Tell us a little more about this case and how we got here.
Okay, so take a little trip down history lane with me. I promise I'll make it interesting. So back in 1977, a Florida State University law professor by the name of Patricia Dorr believed that the state's constitution needed a privacy amendment. She basically saw it as an insurance policy of sorts that would ensure that in the off chance that Roe versus Wade was overturned, that Floridians would still have a safety net. Now, that amendment was passed by voters a few years later and provides every person, quote, to be let alone and free from governmental intrusion into the person's private life. And almost 35 years ago, the state Supreme Court ruled unanimously that the amendment also made abortion a fundamental right. Well, today, with Republican Governor Ron DeSantis having appointed a majority of the justices on a very different court, the state is now arguing that the Supreme Court got it wrong those many years ago.
Of course they are, and we know how this is probably going to go for these people.
Exactly, right? It's not necessarily a good case. Interestingly enough, though, this case was brought by abortion rights supporters. It's formally named Planned Parenthood of Southwest and Central Florida versus Florida. And it was meant to challenge the state's 15-week abortion ban, or HB5. That ban is actually modeled on the Mississippi law that the U.S. Supreme Court upheld with their Dobbs decision. But wait, there's more. Because DeSantis and his Republican-led legislature feel fairly confident that the state Supreme Court will side with their regressive foolishness, they have already approved a 6-week abortion ban that'll be triggered to go into effect 30 days after the court's decision in their favor. So in one swoop, the state could go from protecting the right to an abortion to banning them after 6 weeks.
Yeah, and as we have said many times, most people do not know that they are pregnant by 6 weeks. That is very early into a pregnancy.
Absolutely. But Republicans don't care about that, right? In total, at least 13 Republican-led states have banned abortion. That's according to the Guttmacher Institute, which has resulted in countless near-death experiences and so much trauma for people seeking care for pregnancy complications. There's a lawsuit in Texas, for example, that has exposed this very issue. But after Dobbs, state constitutions have become important battlegrounds, especially as abortions rose in most states this year. That, by the way, includes Florida. So many people will be negatively impacted, if and when this 6-week ban goes into effect. Of course, we will keep updating y'all on this and much more, but that is the latest for now.
Let's get to some headlines.
Headlines.
Former Trump advisor Peter Navarro was convicted yesterday of 2 contempt of Congress charges. That is because he defied a subpoena from the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. Each count carries up to 1 year behind bars and a maximum fine of $100,000. The verdict makes Navarro the second top Trump advisor to be convicted of contempt of Congress. The first was former White House advisor Steve Bannon. He was convicted of 2 counts last summer and was sentenced to 4 months in prison. Bannon is appealing his conviction, and Navarro intends to do the same. And staying on the topic of illegal woes in connection to Donald Trump, over in Georgia, District Attorney Fani Willis yesterday accused Representative Jim Jordan of trying to obstruct and interfere with a state criminal proceeding and advancing, quote, outrageous partisan misrepresentations. As a reminder, Willis is the DA leading the charges against Trump and 18 others over their efforts to overturn the 2020 election results in Georgia. And Republican Representative Jordan, a close Trump ally, sent a letter to DA Willis last month questioning her motivation behind the investigation and demanding documents by Thursday, aka yesterday. Instead, Willis sent over a 9-page letter writing that there is, quote, no justification in the Constitution for Congress to interfere with a state criminal matter as you attempt to do. I absolutely love this woman's response to all the people who try to get in her way. Mm-hmm. It is always respectful, but with a little spice. We always know where the sentiment is, but on paper, it's nice. No one can call her for not being nice.
Absolutely. Some exciting news out of Mexico. The country's Supreme Court ruled on Wednesday that federal laws prohibiting abortion are unconstitutional violations of women's rights. The decision effectively decriminalizes the procedure by removing abortion from Mexico's penal code and requires all federal health institutions to offer abortions to anyone who wants it. Imagine that. Wednesday's ruling is part of a larger trend throughout Latin America, where more and more countries have expanded access to the procedure. And while abortion is still a crime in some Mexican states, state judges will have to abide by the Supreme Court's decision in their rulings. Meanwhile, Mexico will soon elect its first ever woman president as 2 women finalists face off for the top spot. On Wednesday, the country's governing party chose Claudia Sheinbaum as its nominee for the presidency. Sheinbaum is a former mayor of Mexico City and a protege of current Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. She'll go head-to-head with opposing party nominee Xochitl Gálvez, an indigenous activist and tech entrepreneur. Both women are fairly progressive, having shown support for social welfare programs, as well as the Supreme Court's decision to decriminalize abortion. Voters will head to the polls next summer to decide which of the 2 will lead them. In the words of RuPaul herself, may the best woman win.
Yes, definitely. New York City Mayor Eric Adams called on state and federal officials to provide more support in handling the city's migrant crisis, saying that he does not, quote, see an ending to it. Take a listen to what he had to say during a town hall in Manhattan.
This issue will destroy New York City. Every community in this city is going to be impacted.
Adams went on to say that his city faces a $12 billion deficit, an amount that officials say migrants will cost the city over the next 3 years. For context, New York City has struggled to accommodate a surge of migrants from the southern border, with over 110,000 asylum seekers in need of housing, funds, and other services. While the city's sanctuary policies require officials to provide shelter to anyone who needs it, shelters and schools just cannot keep up. Adams has repeatedly asked President Biden and New York Governor Kathy Hochul to help his administration address the crisis by providing more funding and housing along with expedited work permits. And Wednesday was no different, with Adams claiming that his administration has received no support. The mayor's remarks drew strong support from Republicans, of course, who want to do away with New York City's sanctuary policies entirely. Meanwhile, immigration advocates condemned Adams for pushing rhetoric that they say is harmful and racist.
The very first African Climate Summit took place in Kenya's capital of Nairobi this week, and it drew tens of thousands of delegates from around the continent and world. Its goal was to focus on sustainable growth and climate finance solutions, and a total of $23 billion was pledged to green projects by governments, investors, and philanthropists. The United States is putting in $30 million to support climate-resilient food security efforts across Africa, and the United Arab Emirates pledged a whopping $4.5 billion to support clean energy initiatives. Still, the underlying tension was clear. African leaders were frustrated with the lack of urgency from the wealthier international community. The summit concluded Wednesday with the Nairobi Declaration, a strong call to action from African leaders that included phasing out coal usage, global taxes on carbon pollution, and ending fossil fuel subsidies. The leaders said in the joint declaration, quote, Africa is not historically responsible for global warming, but bears the brunt of its effect, impacting lives, livelihoods, and economies.
And finally, in a rare ray of sunshine in the Sunshine State, the South Florida city of Lake Worth Beach earlier this week became the state's first LGBTQ+ sanctuary city. City commissioners on Tuesday voted unanimously to approve a resolution declaring the city a safe haven. Take a listen to Lake Worth Beach Mayor Betty Resch reading the resolution.
The city of Lake Worth Beach shall now and forever be considered a safe place, a sanctuary, a welcoming and supportive city for the LGBTQIA+ individuals and their families to live in peace and comfort.
Yeah, that should be a goal of every city, in my opinion, but it is not, as we have learned. As we have covered on the show before, Florida has passed several laws that target the LGBTQ+ community, like the state's Don't Say Gay law, among others. Here is what Michael Riordan with the city's LGBTQ+ community center told local TV station WPBF 25 News.
Being a resident of Lake Worth Beach, absolutely ecstatic that they've taken a stand like this. As a human being, I'm disappointed that things like this are necessary in this day and age, that we have to have governments coming out and actively saying we will not discriminate against a certain population.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a mix.
Yeah, I don't quite know exactly where Lake Worth Beach is, but perhaps I have a new vacation location.
At this point, it's looking better than most other places in Florida. And those are the headlines. We'll be back after some ads to talk about a proposed law in China that is pretty vague. It would ban dressing in a way that hurts the country's feelings. That is in a moment. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Therapy can help you stay connected to what you really want while you navigate life so you can move forward with confidence and excitement. If you are thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try.
It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge.
Whatever it is, therapy gives you a place to talk through those racing thoughts that are keeping you up at night. Get a break from your thoughts with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/WAD today to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/WAD.
Did you know that if you pay any household employee, like a caregiver or nanny, $2,600 or more this year, nanny taxes come into play? But don't worry. With HomePay.Care.com, you get unlimited access and support to tax and payroll specialists who are available whenever you need. HomePay tracks your employees' hours, offers automatic payroll processing and direct deposit payments, so you don't have to worry about doing it yourself. Specialists will prepare your own tax forms, be the point of contact for state tax agencies, and more. And get this, setting up your employee is hassle-free. Just provide your nanny or caregiver's email, and HomePay will collect all necessary personal information, W-4 withholding elections, and bank account numbers for payroll. Can it get any better than this? Let HomePay take the stress and fuss off your shoulders. Make managing nannies and caregivers even easier with HomePay. Go to HomePay.com now and use code FreeMonthPodcast to get your first month free. That's code FreeMonthPodcast at HomePay.com to get your first month free. HomePay.com.
Is there any trip more delightfully unpredictable than a road trip? After all, who knows where the road will take you? Who knows where you'll stay? Will it be that no-name hotel that says no to every request?
No, you'll have to find the elevators yourself.
Or maybe the one with the extra stale Danish for breakfast.
I think I broke a tooth.
When you want a place you can always rely on wherever the road takes you, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hampton by Hilton. Don't forget about our free hot breakfast.
Hilton, for the stay.
It's Friday Watch Squad, and we're wrapping up the week by talking about a report that China's drafted a law to ban dressing in a way that would, quote, hurt the feelings of the Chinese nation. The problem is that the proposed change doesn't define what that means. Chinese people on social media wondered if, for example, a suit and tie would count, since they originated in the West and they weren't always a part of China's history. So they worry that if the law is enacted, it would be too vague and could lead to abuse.
Now, we usually don't take cues from the Chinese government, but it did get us thinking that there are plenty of styles in America that we find offensive just because they hurt our eyes. So we wanted to propose bans on clothes that we don't like just because we can. We are calling this segment Fascist Fashion. To be clear, we would not abuse people who wear something that we think is ugly. At most, we would rehabilitate your wardrobes by sending the Queer Eye guys to your house, which honestly feels like a reward. So Trevel, if you were a fashion dictator, what is first up on your list of things to ban?
First up on my list is socks with sandals.
Okay.
I'm offended at the thought of it, let alone witnessing it.
Yes, that goes high on the list, but my jaw dropped in surprise because mine is also sock themed. It feels like we're on the same page.
I would also add really quickly jorts, jean shorts.
Jorts.
Not to be confused with Daisy Dukes. If they're like Daisy Dukes, so they're like above mid-thigh, that's acceptable.
That's allowed.
Anything below mid-thigh and you're calling them shorts, it's time to get rid of them. What about for you?
Yeah, I'm with you. There is consensus on our fashion choices here. So my original thought was also sock themed. And I was a little hesitant on this because the fashion girls are doing it and it looks cool on them. But I just gotta say, a crew sock on most people, the ones that cover your ankle, because it's usually a man of a certain age wearing it with the gym shoe, they're bad. They're so bad. It's unflattering. It looks bad on everybody. I mean, the cool girls with the loafers can pull it off, but like that is like 3 people on this planet. They can also pull off jorts. So like they're in their own world. It's fine. They're not normal people. It's not for the rest of us. Again, we will not punish any of you for wearing these clothing items. If that is what you do, if we hurt your feelings, we're so sorry, but you hurt our eyes. One more thing before we go. So you just received your employer's new statement about its commitment to DEI. Now what? In this week's Work Appropriate episode, Samira Kapila, the author of Inclusive Design Communities, joins host Anne Helen Peterson to talk about the ways your workplace can actually follow through on DEI and listeners' questions about how to engage in effective, sustainable.
Today's episode is sponsored by Chevron.
Good morning. Welcome to Axios Today. It's Friday, September 8th. I'm Nyla Boodoo. Today on the show, your car has the power to gather and sell data about your life. But first, low-risk campaigns for the 2024 frontrunners. Our weekly politics state of play is today's one big thing. The 2024 presidential election is looking different from elections past for a number of reasons, with a former president running against a current president, something that's only happened a handful of times in U.S. history, and now with some distinctly low-profile campaigns from the frontrunners. Axios' Alex Thompson has this and more. Hey, Alex.
Hey.
Is it fair to say that both Joe Biden and Donald Trump are running more subtle campaigns this time around?
I mean, I would go a little bit further. I would say they're running very low risk, very low visibility campaigns at this moment. Now, things could change next year, but there's reason to believe that we're going to see a 2024 campaign without, a lot of traditional campaigning.
And so former President Trump needled Joe Biden saying he was running a basement campaign. Are you saying that Trump is doing the same thing right now?
Yes, 100%. Essentially, he's being way out campaigned by all of his rivals in terms of number of public events. Donald Trump only did 2 public campaign events in the entire month of August, opting for more private events. I think there are 2 things going on. One is the guy's 77. He doesn't have the same energy as some of his younger opponents. But there's also the fact that he is now under 4 indictments. There's also a possibility that there could be more charges added to those indictments. And the fact of the matter is that his lawyers want him to do, have a little bit low risk, because there's a real possibility that if Trump does not win this next presidential election, he will spend the rest of his life in jail. And so his lawyers are saying, you need to be careful. You need to be cautious.
I want to get back to former President Trump in a minute. But first, Alex, how are we seeing Joe Biden run a low profile campaign?
Yeah, so obviously the quote unquote basement campaign became a meme of the 2020 election during COVID. Now, Joe Biden's campaign, distinctly from Donald Trump's, made it a top priority, really the priority, that Joe Biden cannot catch COVID during this campaign. As a result, he did almost no public campaigning and did a lot in a studio set up in the basement of his Wilmington home. Now what you're seeing is that Joe Biden is 80. He's turning 81 later this year. He'd be 86 at the end of the second term. And he is doing a lot of events, but they're almost all presidential events. Essentially, there is a question of whether or not, he can sort of keep up this robust schedule that you've seen from Presidents like Obama, George W. Bush, where you're doing this 1-2 punch of both presidential events and campaign events simultaneously. And so far, Joe Biden has only done 1 campaign rally since he announced his candidacy in April.
I don't want to let you go without asking you about the fact that a judge just ruled this week that Trump is liable for defamatory statements he made about E. Jean Carroll. How are the former president's legal troubles, multiple lawsuits, trials, going to play into how he's running his campaign? Is that another motivator, as you're saying, for this kind of basement campaign?
Yes, in part because lawyers have indicated that a lower risk strategy may be better better. Logistically, the legal matters are going to suck up a lot of Donald Trump's time. And the fact of the matter is that he is going to have to be involved in some of it. And a lot of that's going to be behind closed doors. So that's going to take him off the trail. Then there's the other question of what does this mean politically? You've seen poll after poll saying that Republican voters actually feel they are more likely to support him because of these indictments. That Trump has essentially made himself into a sort of martyred figure for a lot of these people's grievances. The question, though, if he does become the nominee, do these indictments end up starting to hurt him politically? Do independents in the swing states, which are Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, how do they feel?
Alex Thompson is Axios' national political correspondent. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Earlier this week, we told you about Narcan, the opioid overdose reversal drug becoming available over the counter for the first time in many places, for a suggested retail price of $44.99. Since then, we've been hearing many of your thoughts and stories.
Hi, this is Jenny from Burlington, Vermont. My cousin overdosed in 2017. He was with someone at the time who was too scared to call the paramedic, and tragically, he died. It's very painful to know that his life could have been saved by Narcan if that person had either called the paramedics or had Narcan on hand to use on him. I'm really glad that Narcan is going over the counter, but I wish there was a way to distribute it widely at little or no cost. Vermont just installed a vending machine that gives it to people here for free, and I'd love to see something similar like that happening nationwide. Thank you.
And Jesse from Oakland, California, wrote to tell us that Narcan and fentanyl testing strips can be found in many local bars in his area, free of charge. Thanks as always for sharing your thoughts. After the break, a new report on the lack of privacy in our cars.
Chevron is working to responsibly meet rising energy demand across their U.S. operations, like at their Gulf of Mexico facilities, which are some of the world's lowest carbon intensity operations, helping supply energy that's affordable, reliable, and ever cleaner. That's energy in progress. Learn more at chevron.com/meeting demand.
Welcome back to Axios Today. I'm Nyla Boodoo. A new report says your car has unmatched power to spy on you and share that data. Axios' Felix Salmon covered this new report from the Mozilla Foundation, which says automakers essentially have no respect for our privacy. Hi, Felix.
Good morning, Nyla.
So, Felix, famously, there's the story of the CNBC executive whose car was totaled and sent to Ukraine, still connected to his Spotify account. Is that an example of the kind of privacy mess we're talking about here?
That's a very rare consumer-facing example. It's where the big, huge 25 gigabytes per hour, per car, per driver of data that gets spewed out of today's connected cars somehow inadvertently finds its way back to the actual driver. Most of the time, this data flow is very much one way from the car to the manufacturer, and we don't know what kind of data the manufacturer is collecting, what they're selling, what they're handing over to law enforcement. They're not telling us. They all signed the privacy policy, well, nearly all of them signed the privacy policy, and one of the more alarming revelations from the Mozilla report was that 0 of the 20 signatories to that privacy policy are actually following it.
And are they transparent about their data privacy policies?
That's one of the promises they're not adhering to. They all promised that they would be transparent about this kind of thing, and none of them are.
Can you put this into context for us? How much data actually could be gleaned from someone's car? What are we talking about?
So in numbers, it's 25 gigabytes per hour, which is absolutely enormous. In dollars, it's hundreds of billions of dollars per year. It's all the obvious things like where you're driving, how fast you're accelerating or braking. Also, everything you're doing in the infotainment system, what songs you're listening to, what apps you're using, when you're making phone calls, when you're getting text messages. There is a whole bunch of data that companies like Nissan and Kia say they can share with their partners, which includes like immigration status, driver's license number, sexual activity, genetic makeup. Who knows whether they actually have that information, but they say that they reserve the right to share it if they do.
Who would buy this?
Data brokers and basically anyone in the big data world, all of those big secretive companies that either want to target us with ads or want to sell us stuff or just want to know for whatever nefarious reasons they might have about what we're all doing.
So where does that leave consumers?
In a really bad place. If you want to buy a car that respects your privacy, the only real option you have is don't buy a new car. You have to buy an old car, a dumb car. Today's cars are all computers on wheels, and they will share your data. If you buy a 1985 Volvo, then I suppose you don't need to worry.
Axios' Felix Salmon. Thanks, Felix.
Thanks, Nyla.
I know we reached out to Kia and Nissan for their comment, and both said they take consumer privacy seriously. We have their full responses in our show notes. And finally today, some news about us. Next Friday, September 15th, will be the last episode of Axios Today. After an incredible 3.5 years with you, some of the most engaged listeners I've come across in this business. But there's some very good news also. I'm not going away as we're reimagining our audio presence at Axios. And we're going to be back very soon with a new weekly program that I'll be hosting, and I can't wait to share with you. So keep following us and stay subscribed so you don't miss the new show coming next month. And we'll have more information on that very soon. Axios Today is produced by Fonda Mwangi, Lydia McMullen-Laird, and Robin Lynn. Our senior sound engineer and producer is Alex Sugiura. Alexandra Botti is our supervising producer. Asia Whitaker-Moore is Axios' executive editor, and Sarah Kehalani-Gu is Axios' editor-in-chief. I'm Nyla Boodoo. Stay safe, enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you back here on Monday.
Demand for energy is projected to reach a record high in 2023 and will continue to rise in the future. To help keep up, Chevron is increasing their U.S. oil and gas production. And they're aiming to do it responsibly across their U.S. operations, including their Gulf of Mexico facilities, which are some of the world's lowest carbon intensity operations, helping supply energy that's affordable, reliable, and ever cleaner. That's energy in progress. Learn more at chevron.com/meeting demand.
Will make people angry. The fact that Trump used the presidency to enrich himself is like unprecedented, and the ways he did it are hideous. And like Democrats didn't really
remember somebody like your mother-in-law. That's part of his DNA.
College football is complicated. Chris Vanini covers college football for a living, and even he thinks it's complicated. College sports has always been built.
Which comes from NPR sponsor Progressive Insurance, where drivers who switch could save hundreds on car insurance. Get your quote at progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates.
Today on the show, my husband won't make a family budget with me. He's good with his own money, but anytime I bring up our shared finances, he shuts down. What gives?
Dear Life Kit.
Dear Life Kit.
Dear Life Kit.
Dear Life Kit. I have a question for you.
This is Dear Life Kit from NPR.
How can I become a better caretaker?
How do I deal with my parents' unrealistic expectations?
And we're getting personal.
I'm catching feelings for someone, but they're married.
I'm your host, Andy Tagle. Every episode, we answer one of your most pressing and intimate anonymous questions with expert advice.
It is absolutely a cornerstone of a healthy romantic partnership to be talking about money.
That's today's expert, Lindsay Bryan Podvin, a returning friend of the show. Lindsay is a social worker turned certified financial therapist, host of the Mind Money Balance podcast, and author of the book, The Financial Anxiety Solution. Today, Lindsay will help us with the tricky business of merging money habits.
Support for NPR and the following message come from Edward Jones. You could go alone, but when you have a partner, you could go farther. And when you want to navigate through all the complexities of retirement strategies, it can help to sync up with an Edward Jones financial advisor. They can help you figure it all out with an approach that puts your goals first, not their products. And best of all, they're right around the corner. Let's figure it out together. Edward Jones.
This message is brought to you by NPR sponsor Progressive Insurance. You call the shots on what's in your podcast queue. Now you can call them on your auto insurance too with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive. Tell Progressive how much you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll show you coverage options within your budget. Get your quote today at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Prices vary based on how you buy. This message comes from Apple Card. Apple Card has a cash back rewards program unlike other credit cards. You earn unlimited daily cash on every purchase, receive it daily, and can grow it at 4.15 annual percentage yield when you open a savings account. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone. Apple Card is subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners, subject to eligibility requirements. Savings accounts provided by Goldman Sachs Bank USA. Member FDIC. Terms apply.
Today's question has to do with spouses and money. Before we get into all of it, I'm curious, can love and money ever live happily ever after?
Absolutely, they can live happily ever after. I think it's a myth, particularly in our society, that if you talk about money, it's unsexy, it's bad, it will stigmatize the relationship, it will bring it down, it'll be negative, like it takes all the love and romance out. And I, having done this work for a while now, I'm really of the mindset that couples who actively and openly talk about money, they tend to have deeper depths of intimacy. They seem more well-connected, and the research backs me up that yes, of course, couples who fight about money report being more likely to separate or divorce, but couples who talk about money report being happier than those that don't.
I love it. Okay, are you ready for your question?
Yes.
Okay, let's do it. Dear Life Kit, I'm struggling to get my husband to make a family budget with me. Whenever the topic comes up, he completely shuts down or gets defensive. He grew up in a working class family, while my family enjoyed the benefits of some modest generational wealth. I think this difference makes him uncomfortable talking about money, especially with me. He's also in a chronically underpaid industry, and I think he feels self-conscious about our family's economic position as compared with my extended family and our peers. I know he thinks about finances because he has an active investment portfolio and contributes to his retirement plan. However, I'd like to have a collaborative financial plan. I want to save for collective goals like home improvements and family vacations, but I don't feel like we have any direction right now. We're just winging it, and it makes me feel insecure about the future. We both work, we combined most of our assets when we got married, and we have kids. Do you have any advice on how to get my husband to participate in a family budgeting session? Signed, Marital Money Woes. Okay, Lindsay. Can I tell you the truth right up front here?
Please.
This husband really gets my goat. Like, he's making me mad. You know, it sounds to me like this guy is good about managing his own money, and yet he's just willfully ignoring his family finances. And that feels, I don't know, a bit negligent, mean even. Do you feel lit up at all by this situation?
I don't, but it's only because I do this stuff all the time. This question could have been written by literally any of my clients or anybody who slides into my DMs on Instagram. This dynamic comes up again and again in romantic partnerships. This idea that one person kind of has an idea or has a plan or tries to bring it up, and somebody else is seemingly unwilling. But when I hear from the other person, the person in this case who seems to kind of have his eyes or head down rather on focusing on his own retirement, oftentimes when I hear from that person, they're saying, I am so embarrassed. I have no idea how to talk about money. I can't even manage the anxiety that comes up when the word budget is brought up in my relationship. I'm so worried that I'll explode or that I'll shut down that I just don't do it at all. So I have a bit more empathy for this person because I've met this person many, many times in my life.
So it's a very emotional response, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And we tend to judge the person on their behavior. So in this instance, it's very easy to judge him him on avoiding talking about it and just pointing to, hey, he's not willing to talk to me about money, but we don't know the emotions behind that behavior that could give us a bit more empathy for why he's doing what he's doing.
Okay, so how can they start to bridge the gap when it seems that they have really different money values? How does that conversation look like?
One thing is, before we even talk about money, is to set a time and place to talk about money. I know this sounds very strange, but we really have to set the stage, because most of the time in partnerships, when we're talking about money, we're doing it in a moment where we're emotionally pretty heated, right? Maybe this person is coming in from a big shopping trip at like Costco, and they're lugging groceries in, and they're so mad and frustrated that the budget is higher than they want it to be. And they come in and they say, you never think about the grocery budget. And here I am, and I'm shopping all the time, and I'm spending all the time, and you have no idea where our money is going. That's not a great way to enter into a financial conversation, versus saying, hey, I just got back from Costco. I realize we are spending a ton of money on food. Do you have time this week for us to sit down and look at our food budget? This does a few things, Andy. What it does first is it gives your partner a heads up. It also gives our partner an idea of what to expect during that conversation, versus something vague like, let's talk about money, which can be pretty broad and pretty overwhelming. And it also then puts it in the partner's court to say, oh, okay, let me take a look at my schedule. Let me find the time where I'll be the most able to have this conversation. And then you agree, okay, Sunday after the kids go to bed, why don't we talk about the food budget? And then we can reward ourselves with binging on Succession or whatever else is on TV that night. But we need to first set up the conversation before we have the conversation itself.
Find a neutral space, go to a place and time where you can take as much emotion out of it as you can, then be real specific. At what point does someone's hesitance to talk about money become a problem? You know, it sounds like this person has tried and it's not really working. What can we do about that?
First, give them that opportunity to say, hey, I want to have this conversation. It's really important to me. When works for you? How can we fit this into our schedules? If that person continues to dodge that conversation, you can say to the partner who's a bit reluctant, look, I have tried to bring this up with you a few times. It seems like when I bring it up, you tend to shut down. I'm not here to judge or to harp on you, but this is really important, not just to me, but to our relationship. Is there anything I can do to make this conversation easier? This also then gives the partner the opportunity to say, you know, it actually has nothing to do with you. I just really realized that I am X, whatever they're feeling about it. And if you, the person who is bringing up the money to the partner, is not in a position to help your partner, that's when you can say, hey, let's get somebody else involved. Like, let's say the partner says, I am really.
Yeah, conversations about money came up on Wednesday. We were talking about conversations about spending money amongst friends, like when you're out eating versus, you know, in a relationship in this Life Kit episode. But I think we all have a very tenuous relationship to our financial needs. It's like, you know, how do I say it? Capitalism commodifies ourselves and puts a number on it. And so a lot of times, you know, the amount of money you make, while not an accurate measurement of your self-worth, kind of stands in place of it, because most of our interaction with the world involves capitalism, you know, like to a certain degree. In fact, I think one of the best things I've done for myself is to separate certain aspects of myself from whether or not I'm being productive financially, you know, which can feel irresponsible. And I mean, many people will help you feel like you're being irresponsible if you say, take on hobbies that you never really consider wanting to turn into careers. You know, just doing things for the sake of enjoyment can sometimes feel wasteful because you're not contributing in some way. Anyway, that being said, I think I'm gonna end the live stream now. I really enjoyed that Frost Pulse Stasis build on a Warlock, mainly because Vesper got buffed. I tried it once before, and the funny thing is Vesper's gotten a few buffs in the past. I think this is gonna be the last pass of that exotic, but yeah, it's in a pretty good place. Like it protects you from small tier ads. The freezing absolutely keeps off the big ones. I think blinding kind of did the same thing on Arc, but it makes it where on these two subclasses in particular, you can use this exotic pretty well. You might be able to do it on Void. There is a Solar Soul coming. But I've never tried it on Strand. it could be okay because they all have some classability aggressive fragment or aspect. So let me go ahead and save this loadout. All right. So I might do something tonight. I've got to get the newsreel ready for Greg's live stream. And not really sure what's going to be on the menu. But yeah, make sure to check us out tomorrow at noon. Greg is hosting a live stream that, he likes talking about relationship topics, maybe community issues in the LGBT community, Black community, entertainment, music. It's his choice. It's his show. And it's sometimes like just conversations. What I get the feel from him is like it's conversations that he's had in his head, kind of similar to the way I do, and would just like outside opinions on. His inbox is another source of information of topics when people ask him questions about what to do, So I hope that you'll join us. Let's go to Male Media Mind on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com/MaleMediaMind, subscribe, hit the bell, and you'll be notified when we go live. Thanks for joining for my M3 Gaming live stream. I will catch you in the next one. Peace.